Last week, we talked about the little things that prevent the larger things. This week, we talk about the responsibility of being on the stage you dreamed about. What is it like having to work through moments where motivation is lacking? Use the hashtag JDO3 podcast and Chris C. Speaks to engage us in dialogue. And now, part 2 of Filled to the Brim and Overflowing. Now, I want to get back to this faith thing, but there was a word that you said that jarred me, and you said that I'm trusted. What is it like when a school books an engagement, and that engagement basically says, we are trusting you with our students? Does the magnitude of that responsibility and honor rest on you? Or are you still, or is it just like, yeah, whatever?
So if I told myself if there ever came a day that I didn't get nervous, that I was doing it wrong.
Yeah.
I get nervous before every gig. I don't care if I'm talking to 25 people or 2,500. If it's 50 or 5,000, like my biggest crowd was 8,000 folks in the room, and it was crazy. It was before Rona. Right, so before that Rona had everybody putting, back in the crib. You ain't got no mask on 8,000 people, but like that was amazing, like the energy and the vibe for that. And when I got on stage, like you couldn't tell, but literally the moment before, like they were announcing me, I was in the back, and I was like, Lord, please, I don't want to pee on myself. And it's like, what? You're praying to God that pee on yourself on stage? Like, what are you doing, Chris? You're a pro. Was terrified. So I'm always aware of the moment. And I'm also always aware that I don't control that result, right? Like my assignment is to deliver the message the way it was given to me for this particular audience, right? I never deliver the same message twice. So my assignment is to deliver the message for this particular audience. And then I know that God will do the rest. If I hit 10 people in this crowd of 10,000, those are the 10 that were supposed to be hit, as long as I did my assignment. Now, if I go up there and bomb and I forget my points, that's a whole different story. That's when I don't even accept a check when I do that. But I'm going to make sure that I give it my all every time. But yeah, I absolutely feel the weight. I'll never not feel that weight. But Johnny, look, you feel that weight, man. Like, it ain't nothing compared to getting in the pulpit and preaching. Like, when listen, I had to teach a Wednesday night Bible study, okay?
Yeah.
Just Wednesday, and I knew that when folks realized that pastor wasn't teaching, that it was only going to be like 7 folks, and it was going to be my mama, my kids, like all 7 of them were going to be my family, right?
Literally amen corner.
Literally my amen corner. Still sweating buckets, right? Like the mantle of being a pastor, a preacher, being a minister, and like really having to rightly divide the word of God. I don't know how y'all do it. I don't know how y'all do it and don't lose it. Like, you really do have to dwell in the Holy Spirit. Like, you got to live in that moment, because the pressure for that's enormous, man. Y'all are put on a pedestal that it's not even fair.
Well, I think one of the things that we have learned together, as you saved my bacon while I was youth pastor first, man, and got into a situation where literally I did not feel like the kids were listening. I thought I had lost them. And you remember that. I went to you and I said, hey, I need a month. They need to hear another voice. They need to hear somebody that's younger, fresher, that is relating to them in a completely different fashion. And honestly, at that time, I was ready to officially pass the baton. And I was looking at you.
That person you were looking for, Johnny? That person you were looking for? We didn't find that person, but I was available and willing. So we just went with what we had. Like, it's crazy. Like, so I remember those times. Like, there were so many great things birthed out of that, though, Johnny. Just think about the college spring break retreat that was birthed out of that, and the amount of folks who were exposed to like that different level of, higher ed, and like being able to see different things, not just in Texas, but like Louisiana, Atlanta, right? Being able to have those different types of camps, the conferences, the mixtape. The Flood the Street mixtape that was released from that. Like, listen, man, I'm mad because I can't, like, I have a CD of that, right? But it's a CD and, it's scratched up, and I'd be wanting to I be really wanting to jam and rock out, and my kids be like, Dad, like, we don't want to hear you rap. I'm like, man, these are bars right here, yo. These are bars. Yeah. And then it scratches, and they're like, see, it's trash. Like, even God don't want to hear it. So, you know, like, it's a lot of things that were birthed out of that. And so that's part of that is, you know, necessity is the mother of all invention, right? There's always a ram in the bush. So whenever you feel like you're tired and you can't make the sacrifice, or your arms are tired, there's always somebody there, or there should be somebody there to hold up your arms. You know, you should have someone there to hold your arms up, or there should be a ram in the bush. But you got to trust God for that, right? And then folks got to do what they got to do.
Well, you at the end of one of the questions that I had written down that I wanted to ask you, and I said, as a motivator, I am assuming that you're always motivated. But in the likelihood that you are not motivated, bro, what do you do? Because your responsibility is to motivate people.
But so I want to go back to that. That's not my responsibility.
I got you.
My responsibility can never be to motivate folks. Like, my responsibility is to deliver a message that has points that are universal enough for a lot of folks, like for a large group to understand, but specific enough that you can take it and apply it to your life, and make sure that those things are you know, there's good balance of that in my message. The motivation comes from you, right? Like, it's one, you know, and I also, I don't tell people, well, I did it so you can. Well, because when I did it, it was a specific, unique set of circumstances that were created for me by God, for me to be able to get to where I am, and he's continuing to do that. God's going to create specific, unique circumstances for you to do what he's called you to do. It's just up to you to tap into that, right? So, like, I am very not motivated, man. This pandemic, or panorama, whatever you want to call it, you know, some folks don't like to actually use the word. That Rona hit me in the face, man, and knocked all the swag out of my step, and knocked all the cool out of my step. You know, contracts that I thought I had, that I knew I had, that were signed. You know, they were signed on March 5th, and then I got back from the college retreat, that we do, and March 22nd, those contracts were gone, right? Like, and it's like, oh, now we got to do everything virtual. What? I don't know how to. What, Zoom? Are you serious? Like, who does that, right? So there were times where I wasn't motivated. There are times now where I'm not motivated, but luckily I surround myself with folks who don't allow me to wallow. Like, nobody in my circle is going to allow me to wallow, and they're going to hold me accountable for being the dopest version of myself, always. Like, if I call Jarvis, my boy, hey Jay, man, I'm tired, whatever, he's gonna be like, all right, well, rest, but don't quit. And then he's gonna call and check up on me, or send a text message and be like, I feel like you're quitting because I don't see no content. Like, I ain't heard nothing else about it. So it's just interesting to be able to see that. So I think that it's about surrounding yourself with good people, Johnny, folks who can speak a word into you, like, on sight. Like, you ain't got to ask, they can see it, they can sense it. And then just being open to have folks really hold you accountable and hold you down. You got to open yourself up to be vulnerable for that. And you got to be honest, transparent, to tell people, yo, man, it sucks right now, right? My marriage is trash. My business is trash. My kids are getting on my nerves. I want to punch them all, right? Like, these bills is too much. Whatever the struggle may be, you got to have folks in your life that you're willing to be transparent with, honest enough for them to speak a word and say, all right, but what does the Bible say? What does God say? Well, then you keep believing until this physical world catches up with that. And I'll keep praying and agreeing with you until the same happens. And if it doesn't happen, then it means that you got to keep praying and believing until God has put you in a position to do it. And you got to work toward those goals. So that's how I stay motivated. I got a good circle.
Yeah. Well, I love the fact that you brought us also full circle back to faith, because when you were at First Man, we were talking, and you first talked about this idea of leaving a craft that you were good at and were prospering at. I gotta admit, I started thumbing through the phone book. I was like, all right, we need a black male licensed therapist to speak to this young man, because this man is thriving, he's gifted, he's talented, and he wants to take a new direction and he want to do it cold turkey. Like, what? We just gonna go into it. And I was like, oh Lord, help him, Jesus, speak to him, Lord. So let's talk about this faith and how that also possibly, does it tie into this idea of leadership as a verb? Please enlighten me.
So, man, faith has to tie into everything that we do, right? So my faith is in Jesus Christ, right? My faith is in the Bible. My faith is in the God that I serve. We all have to have faith in something. Like, we all have faith in something. When you sit down in a chair, you have faith that chair is going to hold you up, right? Like, you wouldn't even think about it. You get in your car, you start the ignition, you have faith that that key is going to turn and your car is going to start up. So we exhibit and show and demonstrate faith in our lives in all facets of what we do. We just have to be intentional about the faith that we have in ourselves, right? Like, I think we have to be very intentional about believing in ourselves enough and believing that we have enough in us, that God has put us here for a real reason. And like, if you woke up 10 toes down, it's time for you to keep going, right? Like, I mean, like, if you got 10 toes on the ground instead of 6 feet under, there's a reason why God is giving you another step. So you got to just keep pushing. Man, it ain't that deep, Johnny. Like, so I apologize, right? Like, I'm sure that you've had folks in here on the podcast that are super deep and that have, you know, they're going to quote you a scripture, chapter and verse. But really, I ain't that guy. Like, I'm not. When it comes down to it, Johnny, it's not that deep. It really is. Are you going to do the work, or are you not going to do the work?
Well, I love that, but one of the things that I was getting at is when we talk about faith, there are a lot of people that just speak faith, and we used to call it talking a good game, right?
Selling wolf tickets.
Yeah, selling the wolf tickets. But yeah. Did you actually step out on this faith? And then part of the faith piece for me is not just having faith or confident in my ability, but also having this faith that he is actually with me. And that even in the places where I lack, where I'm not mature enough, where I'm not experienced enough, where I may not even be gifted enough to understand that he is the one that unlocks doors, he is the one that promotes, he is the one that elevates, he is the one that shows favor. And because of this, my future has already been scripted, but I have to be willing to walk into it. So what is that like, to literally see the vision of what God has said Chris Collins will be, and then walking into it?
Well, Johnny, I ain't seen it, man. If I saw it, if I saw the vision, real talk, I don't even know if I would still be working, right? Like, I don't know what God has for this, right? I don't know. I don't know what God has for me 10, 15 years from now. All I know is that right now in this moment, this is something that I feel like I'm gifted and able to do, and that God is providing the opportunity and opening doors to do it. So I do it, right? You know, a lot of times folks, you know, especially church folks, right? They say, you know, God doesn't call the equipped. He equips those that he calls. Yeah, right. Sort of, but he also wouldn't have called you if you ain't have what it already took to get it done.
Yeah, Paul actually was a bad man.
You know, like Paul was ill, right?
He was
like,
a bad man.
Like, he didn't call no scrub. Like, people always like to talk about that. Like,
no, he was a bad man.
He was ill. Like, Moses was ill.
Yeah.
The fact that Moses made it to where he was from where he started, like, Moses was a hustler. Like, Moses had something in him. He had that fighting spirit. Nothing was going to stop Moses, right? If Moses made it from a baby to a man with the life that he had, what's a pharaoh? What's a pharaoh to a guy like Moses? Like, no, he didn't have the ability, the gift of gab, and he couldn't speak, but God didn't need that. See, the problem is God doesn't need the same things we need. We look at situations with our eyes and we feel like we have to have XYZ lined up in order for us to succeed in it. And God is like, dog, you don't need none of that. All I need you to do is just be in the building and be willing to work. The stuff that I already put in you, it's there. And when you do the work, it's going to be shaken up and agitated. And if you study to show yourself approved, it's going to come out.
It'll come out, yeah.
Right?
In that moment, yeah.
In that moment. Like, and then now knowledge and experience builds confidence. So now you have confidence that you can do it. And now you understand that I won't put you in a position to fail. And now when I put you in a position that's going to stretch you again, you're going to scratch your head, but you're going to be like, well, God did it once. He's going to do it again, right? And you just keep building those spiritual calluses to be able to build heavier, to be able to lift heavier and heavier weight.
Do you believe that God has birthed you with a purpose? Have you learned to trust that gift that God has placed inside of you? How has that purpose that you found in God driven you? How has that gift manifested itself? Well, join the discussion. Use the hashtag JDO3 podcast and use the hashtag chriscspeaks to contribute to this dialogue. Join us next week as we continue our discussion with Chris C. Speaks on Filled to the Brim and Overflowing.